What's going on, everybody? LK here. New fighting game, which means that we gotta go through the commonly asked questions about new fighting games, right? So with Street Fighter 6 being out, one of the main questions I have gotten about the game that is not quite about the actual game is what controller is the best controller to use for Street Fighter 6? If you want an easy answer, the best controller to use for this game is the one you're comfortable with. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you guys feel like it. Thank you very much. But there's actually a conversation we can have about controllers because they matter a lot. They are the way that you're going to interact with the game. That's what you're going to get comfortable with. And as you practice, your muscle memory is going to be attached to these peripherals, and they each have advantages and disadvantages. So if you're planning on digging a little bit deeper into the game or making a commitment to either Street Fighter 6 or just fighting games in general, then we need to talk about controllers. So the most important thing actually is that modern fighting games are made for home and not for arcades. That's why this question to me is still a little funny. Because in the past, the easy answer would be, if you're really serious about a fighting game, you should consider getting an arcade stick, because the majority of fighting games were made for arcade sticks in mind, but we'll go into that in a little bit. So first we have the pad. Yes, this is what my PS4 pad looks like. Shout out to 4Loco. This was a fun time. So this is a pad. If you play on PS5, maybe you have a fancier pad, right? DualSense 5 or something. So what are the advantages of playing on pad? So one is how fast you could input stuff. So you can kind of see here, I'm not doing it the best I can, but since the directions are all here, you just have to move your thumb. The buttons are not too far here, so it's very easy. And then you have your triggers right here, so you can just input things very quickly. It's very light. You need no muscles to hold this. It is also the quietest controller. So I'm from Melee, so I mean, if you're like a Smash player, you are familiar with this sound, right? Or like this, or it's from a GameCube controller, right? So GameCube controller is actually pretty loud, but your standard PS4, PS5 controller is not that loud. Like I'm doing quarter circles. These inputs are overall pretty quiet. You have to consider too, depending on where you're playing. Like there's a context where you might be playing offline somewhere in the distant future if we have a huge crowd and there's no way people will be able to hear what you're pressing, which is nice. Again, new fighting games are made with pads in mind, so you don't have to worry about the kind of crazy difficult inputs or anything. Street Fighter 6 still maintains the 6-button layout, but at this point they've been running it for a while and it's pretty familiar to pad players. Now, some downsides to pad. So one, these things don't last that long. So I don't use pads for fighting games, so I don't really care that much. For like tournament friends that I know, they go through PlayStation 4 pads like maybe once every 9 months or so. They go through pads. I've seen people try to buy like Astro C40s, and now like Victrix has a pad. Like they're trying to find a hardier, sturdier pad because of how quickly you go through these. They're just not built to take that much punishment and be input this much. Also, pads are getting more expensive, so I want to say that back in my Melee days, I want to say like a GameCube controller was like $50 or something, which I guess is expensive by today's standards, but I feel like the PS5 controller is like $80 or $90, and then again, like we just mentioned, there's a bunch of other like more hardcore pad alternatives, and those controllers are like they're easily over $100. I want to say they're a couple like $200 at least. So the price of pads, which this is normally supposed to be like a budget option, have been going up over the years. I would also say overall this is the least precise controller. So because you're holding this and you're kind of just moving your thumb, you know what I'm saying? You kind of just moving your thumb. I don't know, it's not as precise. A lot of fighting games have input shortcuts, which I'm also going to make a video about. For pad players, they're like a lifesaver because I remember when I played on pad, for example, my DP input, so my Dragon Punch input would be, I would I'll tap forward like this, and then I'd kind of just wiggle my thumb after pressing forward, and like I would get it. Like that's like not, this is not that precise. It could be hard or annoying to play certain characters from old games, mostly because it depends on the games. If you're playing like Street Fighter, I don't think it's that bad. If you play like Air Dasher anime titles like I do, especially games made before 2015, there will definitely be at least 2 or 3 characters that will be significantly more difficult for you to play on pad than on other peripherals, because they just weren't thinking They aren't thinking about you guys. Either they have mechanics where, let's say, you have to hold buttons and release them, and that thing is just like a weird thing for people in games in general. It's not very common in at least other genres of video games that I've played, at least. Or sometimes people have like weird inputs, or like they just, since they weren't thinking about doing these for pads, again, you could just play a simple character and be fine. But if you wanted to play someone like Zato and GGXX, for example, or there's a couple of BlazBlue characters that are annoying to play, like Carl, Lychee's a little annoying to play, then you're gonna have a hard time doing it on pad. You might be like, okay, you said you started with pad and you switched, so like why did you in particular switch? So like many things involving switching for me, it was a very difficult choice. So a long time ago, I played a game called Melty Blood at Cadenza, and I played it on a PS1 pad. I acquired it on the 7 Seas, wink wink, you know what I mean? And I actually played in a tournament where it was arcade only. So I mean, basically like all games have many tournaments and competitions these days. But when I was starting, I started playing Melty Blood a couple of years before Street Fighter 4 came out, so like 2007 or so. Tournaments were very uncommon. They were extremely uncommon, actually, and I was very privileged to go to school near an arcade. If you've been on this channel for a while, you're familiar with the 144p, 240p glasses. If you're new, this is, we used to call this East Coast shaking cam, so someone's holding a camera. It looks like they have a tripod this time, but this is me playing. I'm player 1, playing Akihila Vermilion against a player named Tinchi, playing Shiki Tono. So this match is engraved deep in my memories because at this point in Melty Blood, I'm doing pretty well. Like, I'm not winning tournaments, but I'm doing fine. I'm a known player. It's a small community, very small community at this time, but you know, people know who I am. I got a little status, you know what I'm saying? And this tournament was a blow up for me. So it was a very small, I want to say maybe there was 11 people in this tournament, and I got 5th, and I was extremely upset. Very, very, very upset. I was struggling. I was really struggling, and it was against people that I played in other tournaments that normally I'm like, all right, next, like go to next, like fine, we got this. This is the only fighting game I'm playing at this time. Just Melty, one game at a time. But losing this really put things in perspective. And I had people ask me, a couple people in the community asked me, they're like, dude, you gotta remember, like, why did you start playing fighting games in the first place? Like, why did you pick this game and start playing fighting games in the first place? So it was this tournament right here. So I went a little bit further in the future. I went all the way to 2008 instead of, usually I use like an 04 example, but the production quality was really high. I mean, in the fighting game community, people make jokes about esports and like serious tournaments and stuff, but the first time I saw this when I was in high school, not knowing that video game tournaments existed, I was like, yo, like this is so sick. I want to go there. Like, how do I get there? Look at the lights, look at the fire. The players have intros and they walk in. Like this, to me, I was like, bro, this is so cool. So this is my real motivation. And you'll notice here, so like the players, you know, they're gonna be shaking hands. Everyone's showing their good sportsmanship, and they're gonna sit down at an arcade cabinet, and not like one of those at like Dave & Buster's. It has like 80 games, or someone put a PS5 down there. Like there's only the one game on there. There's the button layout that's there, and you just play. And after that, I was like, yeah, I'm trolling. I forgot my goals. I got too obsessed with like the tournaments, the small tournaments here. I'm gonna switch to arcade stick, which is what we're gonna talk about next. Next is the arcade stick. So this is the one I use right now, right? Some people call me a professional gamer, so I'm using a professional gaming stick. You know what I'm saying? So arcade stick, advantages and disadvantages. So one, you have pretty good control, honestly really good control over your inputs. The main reason being that you have this lever. So the lever moves in 8 directions. So there's neutral in the middle, you go up, down, left, right. But since you have to move it more and it has to like lock into like a certain section for it to get the input that you want, you could be extremely precise in your inputs. If you like watch my streams or something, you'll hear me talk about like how people have like sloppy inputs sometimes, and you could tell by playing between both how they move and by how they press buttons. Another really nice advantage is almost every single fighting game, I want to say, no, I don't want to say every single one, because for example, there's Mortal Kombat. You know, Mortal Kombat is made for consoles, but most fighting games, especially if they were made in Japan, they were made with arcades in mind. So if you are playing a game from like 2014 or earlier and you're playing on arcade stick, that's what the game is made for. So you're fine. Like, you could pick any character, you're fine. There's not going to be anything weird, and you could just go. Even though Street Fighter 6 is made for home, it's still Street Fighter and has the same standard layout that they've been using basically forever. So even here, it's totally fine to use an arcade stick. There's certain things that are annoying on pad that are much easier on stick. So this is very much not Street Fighter. It's Guilty Gear Strive, but I use this character a lot as an example because speaking of past LordKnight, the first fighting game I played like around when I was playing SSBM was actually Guilty Gear. It was a Guilty Gear XX Sharp Reload, a very old version of Guilty Gear XX. And one of the characters I thought were cool was Eddie. So his name switches between Zato and Eddie. Now the problem is though that I was using pad. Zato is a mechanic where he can summon a friend, a shadow. In this version, he looks kind of cute, but kind of like scary. But in older versions, I mean, it's a demon. Honestly, it's a demon. It's a shadow. And he can do inputs to attack with the shadow. The problem came from how do you do his most important special moves. So because he summoned here you could do special moves with Eddie. You could attack with the shadow and move with Zato at the same time. This causes some pretty dynamic gameplay, honestly really strong. This character archetype is usually pretty good in the Arc System Works games. So in Strive, you actually have the option of doing special moves with quarter circle. So I'm doing all these with quarter circle. You can tell by his animation too that I'm doing these with quarter circle. But there's another way of doing them, and in like previous versions, so like for an Exit for example, you can summon with quarter circles, but after Eddie's out, you have to do these inputs another way, which is called negative edge. So negative edge is when you hold a button and then release the input. The game will only read the input when you release it to do these special moves. So look at the difference at me doing like quarter circle where Zato gives you a little versus if I do it by releasing a button. Notice he didn't do anything, he's chilling. So that is how you could tell that he is negative edging. So what are the advantages of negative edging? So in the old games, you just had to do it. You have no choice. Like if you don't negative edge and you get one of these and then like you'd have to like mash to get stuff, and you don't get the advantage of being able to really control both characters at the same time. Where if you do learn how to negative edge, then you can pull up, let go, and you could have them attack independently of Zato while moving around, which is incredibly powerful. Now, reminder that I'm using this. So to do these, I'm holding this button and then letting go. That's all I have to do is go boop, 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 just like that. This character was made with that controller in mind. If I do the same thing with pad, is it definitely possible? And if you're talking about Strive, like literally, can you play Zato on pad? For sure you can. All you have to do is you do your quarter circle and then you let go and you're fine. However, that's not always the case, and in older games, these characters never did you any favors if you're playing on pad. Another advantage is that it sounds great. I'm a big fan of just a crisp sound of an arcade button. Some people don't like it. I'm a big fan. I purposely leave. I don't like mute the sounds of my controller like on purpose. Small thing, a little button ASMR. That's all. That's all I got. A non-meme one, you can play on basically any platform, no problem. If you're using one of these, you can play on PS4 and PC. I don't actually think you can use these on PS5. If you have a PS5 controller, I think it's PS5 and PC. I know there are people who have a PS5 controller who use a converter to play on PS4. People have all sorts of weird setups. If you're playing on a PS3 controller for some reason, I don't think you can use it on PS4 or PS5. Maybe you can use it on PC. If you're playing on Xbox One, you can't use it on PS4 or PS5, but you can use it on PC. Depending on your goals, of course. Like if you're not planning on traveling or playing or competing or anything, then you just play on your platform or whatever. But this flexibility on pad thing kind of sucks. Like if you go over to a friend's house, they have a different version of the game, you can't play them. But on an arcade stick, as long as there's one that works on that console, you can just use it. Also, many arcade sticks are made to be played on multiple platforms. These days, for example, this is made for PS5, PS4, and PC only. but I have a couple of sticks here that for previous generations, for example. So I had a stick that worked on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 and PC, which was really nice. Finally, you are very clearly a fighting game enthusiast if you own an arcade stick. You're basically getting it to play fighting games. There's a couple other arcade games you could use, right? This for, so like, I don't know, shmups, I guess, but it's very clear you're getting this for fighting games. But let's go into downsides. So the biggest downside by far of stick is that it's expensive, and it's truly expensive. Like, okay, PS5 pads are approaching like $100. That's a lot. So this stick right here is basically the most, again, remember I'm a hashtag pro gamer. This stick is basically the most expensive one. I want to say this is $400. I bought this off a friend, so she gave me a little discount, so I bought it for $350. It's still the most expensive stick I bought for sure. While there's a bunch of great features, so like, I mean, it's not plugged in right now, but there's RGB, and it has like a handle, so I can like carry it around like a briefcase, which is nicer than you think, trust me. There's a detachable lever, so I can take this off. Look, we want to see some magic? I'll take it off. Ready? Ooh, ooh, ooh. Can I do it from this angle? There you go. Hey, take it off. Like, you can put it inside. You could open the stick from the bottom. You want to see? So you just boop. Nice and easy. But all those things aside, it's still a $400 video game controller. That's a pretty big investment. I basically play a ton. I shouldn't say basically. I play a ton of fighting games. I play fighting games like 5 hours a day ish. So I'm playing a lot, or I'm engaging with the video game a lot. But if you are not planning on doing that, it's just a huge investment. I don't know what to say. Another big downside is that stick is technically the slowest of the 3 controllers, and what I mean is we'd have to circle back and talk about pad. So if you recall this, I was wiggling around with my thumb, right? See, I'm like, this is core circle forward, core circle back, down, 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 up, right? So all I'm doing is just moving my thumb, just bloop, bloop, bloop. Even if I'm like a chaotic evil and I'm using my analog stick, I just bloop, 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 bloop. It's not like big motions that you're doing. But and on an arcade stick, you are really doing these motions. So I'm doing like quarter circle forward, quarter circle back, DP. This is a flash kick I'm about to do. You have to move your directional inputs more. You're using your wrist and hand more so that you can clear the gate and get the input. So in theory, I mean, not even in theory, it's just true. It's just true. It's the slowest controller. The difference, of course, is in like frames. So we're talking about like milliseconds, but it really matters. And lastly, they're loud as fuck. So I mean, I had them being loud as a advantage, but it's also a disadvantage. So hopefully I didn't hurt anybody's ears. This doesn't matter if you are playing at home. I lied. It matters if you're playing at home. So if you're playing in like an apartment, this is a classic LK story, but in sophomore year, I don't know what this guy's up to, but he honestly was a nice guy, but I know he fucking hated me. So politely, I had a roommate in sophomore year. Now I'm starting to get nasty. I'm like, ooh, I'm kind of good. I'm getting kind of good at fighting games, right? Still playing multi-blood though. I would play like practice at night, because most people, you know, gamers, anime people, like there are people who just stay up at night and stuff. I'm being a lot better about school than the year before, and I'm actually going to classes and stuff. Go to school, everybody. So the really big problem he had with me, which is fair, is I practice at night. He had to be up at like 6 a.m. to go work out, like he's on a soccer team or something, before going to class at 8 a.m. My first classes of the day are like at 11, so I'm playing from like 10 to 2, maybe 3 a.m. And he has to hear this. So if you're cool, I shouldn't be like that. So like some people can tolerate the noise. Some people can tolerate it. Some people I like the sound of buttons being pressed. Other people might not like that. So if you're living in an apartment or there's somewhere with like skinny walls, or you know, maybe let's say you're a little bit older, you have a kid, like a young kid or something, I don't know, you might not be able to use an arcade stick. There's actually another famous story, again from Guilty Gear, my wheelhouse, of a famous player from Japan who got married and had a kid, and he was from arcades, and he learned pad because his wife was getting angry that he was keeping her up trying to practice online and keeping the kid up trying to practice online. Honestly, heartwarming. So he switched to pad and then he got good at pad, and now he just plays pad. But then there's another disadvantage about the sound, which is that if you go like further and you start choosing to compete in offline events, then some people, not all people, some people will try to listen to your inputs. And there are some people in this world that will actually press buttons on purpose that aren't assigned to anything to see if you're one of these people. I used to be one of these people. I actually don't do it anymore. I'm an honest man. I do what I do. If you look at my hands, I don't care. If you listen to my inputs, I don't care. I'm just fighting you. I hope you feel bad. I'm so committed to not messing with you that I hope you feel bad. But some people are out there. It's not a lot. Also there's online tournaments, and the biggest tournaments are so loud that like, can you really hear their inputs? But just a little thing to keep in mind. And then last but not least, probably the controller that has gotten the most discourse, the most hate, maybe the most search terms on Google. I don't know. So let's talk about Hitbox. First, what is a Hitbox if you don't know? So a Hitbox is, some people call it a leverless controller. So instead of having like a pad, so what is a pad? So a pad has a bunch of micro switches that when you press, it will send a signal and read and input a certain way. And the stick, as we mentioned, when you move the lever, it clears a gate and the gate sends a signal, and that's how you get the input. Hitbox doesn't do that. So Hitbox actually has buttons as directions as well. And this gives you access to stuff that you would not be able to do normally, which is where a lot of the controversy comes from. Also, most people don't know how Hitbox works. I mean, I had to do a bunch of research on this because I don't have one, or else I'd be putting it in front of the camera, like, my pad and stick. So there's also a little bit of almost like mysticism, I think, around the Hitbox. So this controller has been getting way more popular in recent years, not just in fighting games, like traditional fighting games, but also like Smash Bros. There's a Smash Bros. Version of this. Hitbox is really close to, essentially it's a keyboard, that's how I look at it. So if you are a keyboard gamer, it is an option. So advantage number one for Hitbox is it's the most precise controller by far because you're using buttons for directions. So there's just no I want to say no room for error. There's no other way of putting it. So another big advantage is that there are many input tricks for Hitbox. So again, I mentioned before, I'm gonna make a video about input shortcuts for both Street Fighter 6 and then fighting games in general they could use. But Hitbox specifically, because of the nature of the directions being buttons, have a bunch of pretty strong input tricks and shortcuts you can use that other controllers don't have access to. So it's similar to Pad where you don't have to move a lot, but if we pretend that Old Faithful here is a Hitbox, it's the fastest possible inputs too, right? Because all you have to do is just do. This is just how you move. You just hold a button and you do this and you like move like this, and that's all you have to do. Unlike me having like double tap or double tap back or like jump like that, all I have to do is tap a button. So it is the absolute fastest inputs. So this is kind of an argument. Like Pad is very comparable to Hitbox actually for a few reasons, but for the most part, people tend to say that the fastest inputs are on Hitbox because of the buttons. You're also able to do not just input tricks like the one I showed before, but also things that are basically impossible on arcade stick and technically possible on Pad, if not annoying to do naturally on Hitbox. So this is and I know people have been waiting, this is the SOCD, also known as a simultaneous opposing cardinal directions. Okay, I did it right. I did it right. Yes, high five. Yay, we did it. So I'm using this example because it's the most common one. This is the one that I was showed to explain why people were talking about it, why there was the big like Capcom Pro Tour rule change. So this is taking advantage of the fact that there's this SOCD cleaning. Down and up in Street Fighter 5, you get an up input. In Street Fighter 6, you get neutral, I believe. So in this clip, the player is holding down and back, which gives you down back. So the ring finger of the left hand is on back, and then the middle finger is on down. So you notice they're just holding the buttons down, right? So the big fat red nose button on the bottom, that is up. So all they do is they hold back and down, and then they tap up and press kick at the same time, and then they get it. Now, if you're wondering why this is a big deal, is you don't do charge inputs like that with other peripherals. So like in my case, I have to do, I mean, I wouldn't do it with, I would do it with my left hand, but I would have to hold down and then go boop like this. Boop. Notice how there's a couple things you'd have to notice about this. So I have to go from down to up. So for me, I'm doing 3 inputs. I'm doing down, neutral, up. And because I'm doing it like that, I have this travel time. I actually have not only some time where I'm vulnerable because I'm not blocking, because I'm going from down and back to neutral to up. So I have some time where I'm not blocking, but also it is basically impossible. I shouldn't say it's impossible. It's really, really difficult for me to go from strictly down back straight to up and get an instant one. Where here with this technique, of course, it's again in Street Fighter 5, not Street Fighter 6, you're able to not only instantly go from down back to up, which means there's not really somewhere where you could hit the neutral input or keep someone in block stun like that, but also there are cases, rare cases, where because you don't have to go through neutral and up and thus be standing for a really, really, really little bit, you can hit some things that other players would not be able to hit. So that's the example that was just explained to me. I'm sure there's like way more examples. In certain games, you're able to move better with hitbox than in other games. A bunch of games have like special movement stuff. So Dragon Ball had the legendary moon jump that was kept a secret until after the Season 2 World Finals, which is extremely easy to do on hitbox. It takes actually quite a bit of practice on arcade stick. Possible, it was something that I used, but it takes a good amount of practice, where on hitbox is basically trivial and requires no special technique, where on arcade stick it requires a very specific way of inputting it to make sure you get it as fast as possible. The big one for Street Fighter though is way simpler than some technique where you go flying into the sky. It's about how quickly you can dash out of walking. I'm going to use Guilty Gear again, actually for 2 reasons for this. So one is, in Street Fighter, you commonly see people kind of doing this type of movement, like walk back and forth, walk back and forth, walk back and forth, wait, walk back and forth. What if you wanted to go from like walking away to dashing? Look at me do it again. I'm using my arcade stick, which means I'm using the lever. And remember we talked about how you have to travel through, why arcade stick is kind of like the slowest method of inputting stuff. So if I go from back to forward, if you look at it in slow motion, you'll see that I kind of like have a little pause of like not doing anything for a really short window. So in a high-speed game like Guilty Gear, this doesn't matter that much. But in a game like Street Fighter, where you're not moving a lot. Street Fighter is a game about restrictions. Like characters have restrictions, there's movement restrictions and stuff, and you're purposely playing around these things. So people have gained the skill of being able to tell, like you get a little bit more time to react to someone's dash, because if they're using like an arcade stick, then they would have to go to neutral for a little bit as they go through to do their double tap dash. So the reason though I have Guilty Gear though is because they did something that it's a little controversial, but overall it's good for the game and actually makes it so that you can play any peripheral and nobody's really at disadvantage. This game has a dash button. So remember that the hitbox has buttons as directions. So I can go in Guilty Gear, I can boost. In this example, you will not see me go to neutral at all. And it's actually a really common movement technique in this game. Frankly, I mean, it's called dash blocking. You dash and you block. And you can do it in other games, obviously, by dashing like this. But the thing is, when you double tap, when you're using the traditional method of doing a dash, you have a little delay where you can kind of get hit. Where if you dash block, there is basically no time you can get hit. It's the way you hit people out of dash blocking is not by checking them with lows like the traditional Street Fighter ideas. You have to get really creative. He's also doing his best, dash blocking at me. So I have to get really creative, like I have to poke with my overhead, or I have to run up and throw them. But the main thing is that I have the ability to move like a hitbox player in this game because of the dash button. Where in Street Fighter, there is no such button. So if you're playing Street Fighter, then something you have to worry about. Like if you're playing against somebody on hitbox and pad, then they're able to move in ways that you can't move if you are playing on arcade stick. You can also play on any platform, similar to arcade stick. You can just play, like as long as there's a hitbox around, you can just play, it doesn't matter. You can borrow people's hitboxes, like same thing. So now, hitbox disadvantages. So if you aren't a keyboard gamer, I hear people who play keyboard are able to switch to hitbox with basically no resistance or very little resistance. The only thing that's usually weird to them is the hitbox specific input tricks. But if you're coming from a more traditional controller style, so something like PS4 pad, PS5 pad, arcade fight stick, and switching to Hitbox is pretty weird, I would say. Again, it's expensive, so I believe the Hitbox, like the company Hitbox, sells both their Hitbox and Smashbox for $250. There's some lower priced hitboxes available. So for example, there's one that I see that's really popular called the Snackbox Micro. It's a very, very small, very, very light hitbox that you can, basically toss in a small bag or like the front compartment of a backpack, no problem. But still, it is definitely more expensive than pads, and is also more expensive than budget sticks, because I don't know about what's going on right now with sticks, but there's usually like a low point. So like let's say something like the Kanba drone, which probably is around like 120 bucks. Then they have like the standard main stick, which usually is 150 to 250, but I've heard that stick prices have kind of been getting more expensive. And then there are like the high-end sticks that are like 300-400, and like if you get a custom stick, then I mean, it's as much as you're willing to put into it, right? Differences in input latency between controllers is actually one of the main reasons why I bought my Victrix, because it has the lowest latency out of the box. If I'm wrong, correct me in the comments, by the way, but that's what I was told. I asked a couple people that I trust a lot on hardware stuff, and they were like, it's a good buy for these reasons, and I was like, okay, cool. Then you have the problem of games potentially going out of their way to nerf hitbox tricks. So this happened with Street Fighter 6 CPT, where they changed the down and up from being up to neutral with the SOCD. They make you change SOCD cleaning. Even though there are new hitbox techniques available because of this change, that means though that if you're playing on hitbox, and if you've been playing on it for a while, so I've been using arcade stick, for example. I mean, I was in college, so I mean, I've been using arcade stick for more than a decade at this point, right? But I have no problems. Like they're not gonna nerf arcade stick, right? Where with hitbox, with this change, a lot of muscle memory that people are used to having is just gone. Like they just have to relearn how to use the controller. You never know if the controller will be banned or not, or if any specific input techniques will be banned. So I'm not saying that hitbox and leverless controllers will be banned, but what I'm saying is they are definitely not controllers intended for the games, if that makes sense, right? Like someone just had the idea, what if we make the buttons directions also? So it's not like you buy a PS5 and you could buy like PS5 leverless where it comes with a Sony leverless controller. I mean, at least not yet. Maybe in the future that's something that will happen. So you just never know, like if just at the, I don't know, drop of a hat, Capcom decides, oh, we're just gonna ban hitbox forever, or like Namco decides, oh, for Tekken 8 you're just not allowed to use hitbox because everyone's complaining. You just don't know what's gonna happen. So it's a small risk. Like I don't think it's gonna happen, but just some theoretical thing that could happen that you would never have to worry about if you play pad or if you played arcade stick. And last, people will look at you funny if you use this controller. Like if you're using a controller with too many buttons, I mean, hitbox you might get away with, but some people go way too far with all these extra buttons. So even if it helps you, you might get a funny look from people. But all right, that's my breakdown on the 3 controllers. Again, for 97% of people who are watching this video, you really can just use what you have lying around the house and it'll be fine. But for people who are also just 1, curious about the different options, or 2, considering maybe picking something else, hopefully this helped. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, definitely feel free to leave in the comment section below. Shout out to all the people on Patreon supporting. We have like viewer request stuff, and then I'm adding more stuff there because I have a podcast I do. I stream on YouTube Live every Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. EST, so come check that out if you want. Like and subscribe if you guys feel like it, and I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.